What's going on, guys? Welcome back. Today is not going to be a video talking about a tutorial for a team or anything like that. This is more me talking about the overall controversy that we've been having with General Grievous since his rework and the new Separatist droids and their reworks all came out, and how he's not meeting our expectations. But really, there's a couple different things here that have led to this, mostly because the overall hyping of General Grievous was a little too high. And then also, we as a community didn't really question the footage that was provided by CG, and not really thinking about, would this really work, and us just going all in, just absolutely assuming that General Grievous was going to be the new meta, and how that has ended up with this huge backlash. People are unhappy, people are very upset with the state of General Grievous and how well he is performing. So there's a lot that we need to talk about today, but first we need to dive into the hyping and the marketing of General Grievous and talking about how that has led to this problem to begin with. Back at the end of January, we were given the road ahead for February, and that is when we learned that we would not be getting more Sith like we usually get for February. We would instead be getting Separatist droids and a big rework for General Grievous, B2, and Magna Guard. General Grievous was a very much a fan favorite character. He's always marketed as a Jedi killer. That's how he is in the Clone Wars. He's collecting lightsabers from defeated Jedi. He is always known as someone who can defeat Jedi, and that is the beginning of when we thought that this was going to be the new meta, because we already have a Jedi Revan meta, and that one is pretty stale. We'll talk about more about that in a moment here. But with this, we were promised a droideka, the B1 battle droid, and then reworks for the two Separatist droids we have, plus General Grievous, and they are they're excited to tie this into Clone Wars and how we may see more Clone Wars content in the future. And that got us to this point where, we're getting the General Grievous rework, but then we got the gameplay unveiling of General Grievous, and it looked pretty good. As we'll go through Arnold's video here, you can see that it is pretty much going through these Jedi Revan teams and really defeating them, and that was the big pull for everybody. Was they were very excited to see that General Grievous was going to end up defeating Jedi Revan and then going to replace Jedi Revan as the meta. But there's a couple things we didn't really pay attention to because we were so excited to see the end of the Jedi Revan meta. And when you fast forward to the video, you can see that there are times that General Grievous struggled on offense against certain teams. And, they tried this defensive footage of a Emperor Palpatine-led team being crushed by General Grievous, but Emperor Palpatine has not been the meta for quite a while. So that was kind of a red flag already that, hey, look, it can defeat a Emperor Palpatine team. But really, who can't in the meta these days? That Palpatine was a meta from a year ago. So using that to show that Palpatine teams can get crushed by General Grievous, not exactly an overall great endorsement of the team. But then you go forward to, I believe there's footage of a CLS team. Yeah, and here they're fighting CLS with these General Grievous characters. And at the end, it gets to the point where you only have a couple characters left here. And that's not a good sign either. I mean, if you're going to struggle this badly against a CLS team, probably a sign that something is not going to be working very well. Now, CLS is not the meta. CLS is a sort of anti-meta character team against these Jedi Revan and Traya teams. But still, the fact that you're struggling against an anti-meta team like this in this footage, that should have been a red flag for us to say, hang on, something's not quite right with Grievous, and we didn't, because all we saw was that Jedi Revan was getting defeated by General Grievous. And CG, I'm not going to say CG intentionally misled us here, but I do think that CG need to be more upfront and honest about what they're using on this teams, and that is when we got this post overall after the backlash, talking about how we need to be modding General Grievous and what to look for here. And you can see here they're using 6 dot mods, 3 health sets, 2 health primaries, and a crit damage primary on the triangle. And General Grievous in the sample footage has about 65,000 health. Now you're wondering how much health is that? If you go look at my General Grievous right now, I have a health primary here. I don't have a 6 dot health primary on the arrow, but I do have health on the cross and on the circle as well. I'm sitting at 63,000 health. Now that's pretty close, but also go and look, I've got full gear 12 plus. I mean, I'm gonna struggle pretty hard to get to that 65,000 health that they're running General Grievous. So it is a very, very mod intensive team, and I think that's part of the problem, is that people were going in thinking that, oh, General Grievous, you can just mod him for health, throw a crit damage primary on the triangle, it will do great. But to get close to that General Grievous we saw in the footage, you've got to have incredibly good mods, and some really solid 6-dot mods with some bonus health secondaries. That is not something a lot of people are going to be able to manage, and that is a problem that we've actually seen in the past. If you guys go back and remember Chewbacca, when Chewbacca first came out, the first 24 or 48 hours, he was terrible. It was bad, he was getting destroyed on defense, we couldn't figure out what was going on, but as it turns out, as we were going through and tested him out, and that's when I started doing these modding guides, it was all about the modding for your team, because a lot of people would have a super fast Han Solo, like 250 speed, that would end up killing your Chewbacca against those Traya teams at the time, which were the meta, because Chewbacca was moving so often with Han Solo that Chewbacca's health was getting destroyed, and it would just take someone sneezing on him and he would die, and once Chewbacca dies, your whole CLS team falls apart. And that was the problem. Back then with Chewbacca, we started to see a change from these typical, super fast crit chance, crit damage, super fast speed sets on everybody, make them really fast, make them hit hard. That is when we started to get pull away from that. Chewbacca forced you to mod your rebels differently, and that is why I came out with these modding guides, because at that point we started to see a shift from your typical mod layouts to these other teams that are much more depending on certain kinds of mods and layouts. So like General Grievous, you have to have lots of health on him. Your Chewbacca teams, you can't have a super fast Han against Traya, because that would wreck Chewbacca very easily. So that is all part of hyping. We saw General Grievous defeating these Revan teams, and that is all we saw. We didn't stop to say, hey, we can see that he's defeating Revan, he's struggling against these CLS teams, maybe that should be an indication that something's not quite right. And, CG did say, I believe Carrie said in her Reddit post, that they want to make sure that they put General Grievous in as best a light as possible. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. That is their whole purpose. That is marketing 101. You want to make the character look as good as you can without intentionally misleading people. And I'm not going to say they intentionally misled people here, because they didn't, crop the footage or Photoshop stuff. They showed Grievous beating Revan teams. They weren't upfront and honest about the modding layouts and how incredibly well modded those teams were, and they should rightly be criticized for that, but they definitely did not lie and bait and switch and mislead us to the point where, people could sue them or say that they bait and switched us. They were not upfront and they weren't transparent, and that should change for the future. They definitely need to be talking about what kind of mod sets they're running on these characters and how well modded they are, because like I showed you already, 65,000 health on Grievous, that is going to be very difficult to obtain. So CG does need to be more upfront and honest about that in the future, and they've already acknowledged that they need to be doing that in the future. I believe Carrie said that in here. They're going to be, moving forward, one of the things we're probably going to do is release a series of tips and infos, bullets, etc., that show like the stats, things you want to aim for with those characters, which is great, because there's a lot of people who don't watch, my video for modding guides or anything like that. They just go blindly in with crit damage and crit chance on a General Grievous team, and they can't figure out why it's not performing well. Now, one other thing I do want to mention is those of you who are running these General Grievous teams without any Zetas on them, I do not want to hear about how you are not winning against these Revan teams. If you're running a General Grievous team with no Zetas on it, you absolutely do not deserve to win against the Revan team. But don't start running around saying that General Grievous and his droids are useless because you don't have any Zetas on them. I've seen that from quite a few people. Don't do that. Now, moving on to why we were so desperate to, acknowledge this footage and why we didn't really question it. Jedi Revan is everywhere in the meta. I mean, you go up and down Revan, there's a CLS team, Revan, more Revan, there's a Traya. So many Revans, there's a couple of Trayas here, but it's just a sea of Revans. There's so many Revans out there, and that is the whole problem, is this meta is incredibly stale, and it's frustrating, because we have these 5-minute matches against these Revan teams. All we saw was General Grievous defeating Revan, and we were so desperate to see someone defeat Revan that we blindly accepted that Grievous is going to be the new meta. And that, I think, is why we didn't question it. We should have been questioning that footage up front. We should have been questioning it ever since the Chewbacca mess happened. And we still have not learned our lesson as a community. And that falls on us. We should be able to sit there, look at the footage, and say, okay, it looks good. What is that team running? And that falls back to CG needing to be transparent about this stuff. But it also falls to us saying, okay, they're making it look good, and we should know that they're making Grievous look as good as they can, but then we should say, okay, if they're making him look as good as they can, what are they running on the team? What are the mods on the opposing team? Why does it look as good as it is? Is that something most people can achieve? And for Grievous, the answer was no, but that needs to be something that we as a community need to be asking in the future. We should have learned with Chewbacca, we didn't. Now we have this General Grievous mess. And for Darth Revan or Malik, whoever's coming out in a couple weeks, that is something we need to ask then as well. What is that team running in the preview footage? How good is it? How well modded are the opposing teams? That is something that we as a community need to be focused on in the future. So there needs to be more accountability from CG, which they've acknowledged. There also needs to be more accountability within the community too, because we can't just blindly rush in the first 24 hours, say, oh, this character sucks, garbage, refunds. We need to take our time, give it a week, and see how well the character is going to perform. Now, Carrie also did say in her Reddit post that the intention for Grievous was always to make it not an arena meta team, but something that could compete very well in Grand Arena, and that is what we found so far in testing. I'll have a video out on that in a couple of days here. This team, incredibly good for offense in Grand Arena. It's very iffy against your Traya and your CLS and your Revan teams, but anything else, it can absolutely wreck in there. So Grievous and your separate droids, going to be a very solid Grand Arena Territory War offensive team. They're definitely still going to be a team that you can invest in and not really feel like you've been ripped off. So not everything is going to be an arena meta, and that's something else. We are always expecting the new team that comes out to be something that's going to compete in the arena. And remember that with the solo movie Scoundrels, we thought, hey, this is going to be great for arena. Not really good for arena, but Kira, with her leadership coming out with Mission and Zalbar, L3, some other Scoundrels, provides one of the best defensive territory war teams out there. So there are uses for these characters outside arena, and that's something we need to see and acknowledge. We can't just go in and saying, okay, this has to be an arena meta team. There are teams that are going to be great in other places. Bosk and his bounty hunters, that comes to mind as well. The bounty hunters, not good for arena, but they are very good as a defensive team in territory wars, and a Jango Fett-led bounty hunter team can also be very good on offense too. There is more usage for these teams than just arena, and that is something we need to acknowledge as well. So there is a lot that can be taken away from this overall mess. We need to start being more aware of what we're having thrown at us from marketing and these CG preview videos. We need to be questioning more than we are now. And that hopefully is something we can learn from this General Grievous mess. But also at the same time, CG needs to learn that they need to be more upfront and transparent with us. There are times when we have messes like this that really pisses off the community. And, you know, the anger overall I do feel for, you know, that is definitely justified because Grievous was marketed as a Jedi killer in a way, very hyped up as a Jedi killer, and that was definitely overhyped. There needs to be more realistic expectations from us, and there also needs to be more realistic marketing from CG, showing that, hey, you know, maybe show some defeats as well. You know, you can't just show the team winning over and over and over again. That makes us think that this is going to be the new meta team. We need to see defeats of these teams as well. We need to see these teams also being countered by someone so that we can actually say, hey, this team looks good. Maybe, just maybe, it's not going to be the arena team that we are expecting it to be. So that is going to be it for this video for me, guys. You know, a lot of talking. And, you know, there's a lot of stuff to learn from this, and hopefully we can learn from this. I know some people are not going to be happy with this video. They're not going to want to hear that we also need to be more accountable on ourselves and start questioning things. They just want to blame CG, and that's fine. I totally get that. But at the same time, we also need to accept some responsibility for ourselves for this Grievous mess too. So that's going to be it for this video, guys. If you all did enjoy it, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Appreciate you guys watching. A big thank you to all my patrons who make this kind of stuff possible. And as always, guys, I will talk to you all later.